Welcome back, everyone, to the Lawcast. I am Chris D. Santana, and this is Melanie Thorley. We are both solicitors here at MJT Law, and we're here again. And back by popular demand is Chris's Triple C's, which I have called Chris's Crazy Commission Cases.
I like it.
This week we have it's the matter of Logsdon and Surfside Bus Lines Proprietary Limited.
Okay.
So to start with, as you can imagine with their name, they run a transport company.
Yeah. Where are they? They're in Gold Coast?
Victoria.
Victoria. Oh, okay. So we're in Queensland, everyone. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And they are, bus service.
Yeah.
And the employee is a bus driver.
Right.
She has been there for quite some time.
Okay.
And she's dismissed principally for two particular incidents.
Mm-hmm.
The first is she misses the stop of a child.
Okay, so that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't know, here in Australia, this happened probably about 17, 18 years ago now, where a child was missed at a stop who was waiting, 14-year-old, 13-year-old kid. And he was then kidnapped and presumed dead, right? We haven't actually ever found the body.
Oh, actually, I'm
They
not
have
sure.
prosecuted.
They have prosecuted as
They've prosecuted somebody who has now been, convicted of his murder. But yes, so ever since then, there was a no child gets left behind policy.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, they haven't really delved too much into it as to why they missed it. There doesn't seem to be any fault on the bus driver.
Okay.
However, she then decides to use her smartwatch to contact the mother of the child. This must be this must be quite a
small community.
Quite a small community. That
hey, little Johnny's out at the bus stop. I didn't pick him up.
He missed his bus or whatever. Come pick him up. So
smartphone on her watch.
Yeah, so she's speaking to it like you're in Spy Kids.
While she's driving?
Okay,
I see what's happening here.
Now, when it comes to that, it should be noted that they did have a policy around that.
Apart from it being against the law.
Well, in this, it was determined that is, in the state for which she is in, it is not illegal.
Oh my goodness.
And there was some chat around whether they should be applying the rules or laws of other states as almost a benchmark as to whether this was acceptable or not.
Doesn't meet the pub test though, as you would say.
Well, I actually disagree. I think it does, and certainly the commission agreed to me because firstly their policy said that they are not to use any Bluetooth devices.
Okay. So nothing sort of over your ear, kind of chatty wet.
No Bluetooth devices. I mean, as well as mobile phones.
Yeah,
not to be eating while driving. There's a whole bunch. But when specific for this was all it had, Bluetooth. And they have also said that she ought to have picked up her Twoway radio that's there,
yes.
and rung it into Central, who would then contact them. Bear that in mind. The second incident happens afterwards.
Right.
Not on the same day.
Being the second incident after all.
Yes. And you'll really like this one. So a passenger comes on board. Now this was during when we had mask mandates.
Right.
In Victoria.
Okay, yes.
Including, of course, on public transport.
And the bus driver themselves.
And the bus driver.
Okay.
So they had a policy that said that they are not to escalate matters with
a passenger who is or isn't wearing their mask properly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, there was a direction which was given via email to all the bus drivers saying you are not there to enforce the mask mandate.
Look,
let it happen, basically.
Look, that kind of makes sense because otherwise you're going to be in conflict with at least half your passengers half the day.
Yep. So they basically had a policy that said, don't engage. Don't engage. A passenger comes up. They are wearing their mask on their chin.
Oh, okay.
They are they at least claim to be a law student. They are a law student. The bus driver asks them to put their mask on. They then refuse.
Of course.
And a massive scene happens. And the quote that they've pulled out here and I will be swearing online, but
it's all good.
Fuck off, Karen, is what was said.
This is the bus driver. Fuck off, Karen, to the bus driver, or fuck off, Karen, to the passenger?
The passenger to...
Passenger to the bus driver. So obviously everyone knows each other.
Yeah. And... but then, unparticularised, she then gets verbally abused by the passenger such. They then stop the bus at the next stop. The police are called. The remaining passengers are all told to get off the bus. After a while, the police attended and the passenger caught the next bus. And they were not arrested. So, what do you think about the two of them, about those two incidents? Before I get into what the commissioner thought about all of this.
Oh, look, the child left behind is a bit dodge. Using your mobile phone and using your phone's a bit dodge. I don't like any of that. I'm just going to pop that like that. Probably just highlighted the fact to everyone. I don't like any of that. I don't like the engagement because it's willful disobedience to a directive from your employer, which is probably very sensible, to be fair. I get it, masks are designed to protect the other person, not the person wearing it. We all know that. We know the psychology behind it. I don't like any of it. She was fired. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, if you think about the first incident...
I would have fired her.
First incident, the commissioner made...
You're out there.
The commissioner really was critical on the policy itself.
Okay.
And one of the things they said was, in order to fire someone on a policy, it needs to be concise. Mm-hmm. It needs to be clear exactly what is and what isn't allowed.
Right.
And their policy didn't do so. And for rightfully or wrongfully, the policy was actually fairly common. It's one that you would see quite a lot for employers when it comes to this sort of thing. And
I mean, if you have to put everything in there, won't it be like 50 pages long?
Well, they certainly thought so. That just saying Bluetooth device is not enough. Especially considering it wasn't caught by... there was a catch-all saying you're not to do anything illegal.
Well, isn't the phone connected to your watch actually via Bluetooth? I mean, how does it connect? Because it doesn't have its own chip in there, does it?
But they draw the fact that although it might have been a Bluetooth device, the fact that the list just says a Bluetooth device doesn't confine it enough in order to determine which Bluetooth devices. I mean, are we talking about connecting? I mean, I know this is in a bus, so there's not going to connect their phone to the radio. But that would be also doing the same.
Okay, so not enough. So it needs to be more descriptive, like Bluetooth device for use as a communications tool.
Things like that. Anything.
That sort of thing.
It just said not to use Bluetooth devices.
Okay.
They doubled down. They put an alternate. The commissioner, which said even if it was a breach of the policy, they certainly didn't see it as one which would have justified dismissal on the fact that if she had have picked up the two-way radio, which is what they said she ought to have done, the commissioner was satisfied that would have in fact actually taken more time, her eyes off the road for longer, and still involves her grabbing something and talking.
I'm sorry, I just can't agree with any of this stuff.
Go on.
Because either two-way radios are acceptable or they're not. You can't just go, well, they're the same as using a mobile phone, therefore mobile phone should be fine. But
it does raise that question though, doesn't it?
I don't think it needs to. That's the problem. We all know that there are a lot of companies out there who communicate with their drivers by two-way radio, and that's been happening since before mobile phones existed.
Yeah.
And we've always been okay with that. And yes, it's a nuance. Everyone can see it. It's like, I don't know, there was a heat wave here a couple of years ago, and some chap on his way home on a Christmas Eve drive down through one of those motorways that gets completely... He was drinking a bottle of water, and the police picked him up for not taking due care and assistance on the road. And he was like, dude, I was drinking water. And they said, well, that's not what we're getting you for. We're getting you for not... You know, and that sort of...
catch-all.
You know, this kind of common sense point of view. The fact is, if we nuance it and say your mobile phone can only be used for making phone calls, it's not as simple as picking something up, pressing a button, and then directly talking. You have to dial the number. It's not about text messaging. If your mobile phone could be used as a CB radio, that could be a different nuance. But that's not what we're talking about here.
Well, I mean, that's big the question why two-way radios are actually allowed.
They're allowed because one has to communicate at some point.
So.
I mean, the police use them.
Yeah, I what I'm saying is, it begs the question why we have a certain level of risk appetite.
Well,
because it's not to say that we're happy for people to be not distracted whatsoever.
No, because people are allowed to eat, people are allowed to drink, people are allowed to talk to a passenger. You're actually allowed to have your pet on the seat next to you. You can't have it on your lap while you're driving. That's apparently unlawful. But you know, I don't like it. I think I don't like it. But the Commission agreed with Karen.
So they also, this is a very kind of funny kind of statement as well, that one of the other things they're talking about that it might have been not justifiable for a termination was that this was a breach that does not justify the issuing of a final warning, which then led to a termination. The applicant was providing a service to a worried mother, not having a bet on the last race at Doomben, or talking to a friend.
Oh my God!
So they are drawing on the fact that the employee was trying to.
So it's
do the right
okay
thing.
if you're calling up somebody who doesn't realise their kid is in danger right this second.
But doesn't this come to the fact that sometimes common sense does prevail, that you have a situation where an employee is in... She either breaches although she doesn't need to breach, she could pick up the radio. What I'm saying is you've got the child there, they're in danger, at least in some respects, and you took steps. And although the steps might have led to a breach, and
on a different day, if she didn't know the mum and didn't have a direct phone number, she would have picked up the radio. So what the hell's going on here?
Well,
look, I think it's willful. I do. I think it's willful. So why not seek? Okay, maybe termination if she's been there for a cajillion years would have been too harsh. But when's enough? When do you terminate? When the next incident happens? What if she punches someone next time? There seems to be an escalation. I don't know. At what point do we say this is not okay behaviour?
Well,
I totally would have fired her.
I don't know. I take a different view on that. But
go on.
Next incident.
Oh, right.
This one is the one that seemed to really.
So there were three incidents.
Sorry, the second incident.
The second incident
this is
being
what the commissioner thought about it.
Right. Okay. Being the argument about the face mask.
Yes, and they were fired for refusing a lawful and reasonable direction.
Yeah.
Direction being
ignoring it.
Not. They've called it enforcing the mandate.
Okay.
And again, the commission wasn't particularly happy with that as a reason for termination.
Wow.
But I actually quite like what they've said here because this was not one where she actually enforced the mandate. She didn't say to the passenger, you can't come on the bus. She didn't say, I'm going to stop the bus. She only really did it when the particular chap started abusing her, which is a completely different thing.
But how did the abuse happen though?
The abuse happened when she said, can you put your mask on? But she didn't say, you're not allowed in the bus if you don't put your mask on. Very different. I think a very different
Maybe. Okay, so she's asked the person to put their mask on. They have a overreaction to it, like we've been seeing, in fact.
Yeah,
those who are not complying with the COVID rules tend to overreact when someone's mentioning it to them. And therefore, the reason why the policy is in place, because of this apparent overreaction from the perpetrator of the thing. And then it goes off the Kazam. She gets abused. She decides she's going to call the police. Now, once she gets abused, as long as she's not escalating it, I can understand why she might want to call the police and get this nutter butter off her bus. But I'm not sure her motivations for pushing the nutter butter off the bus and calling the police was because of the abuse, but because she was probably so angry they didn't put their mask on and thought they could do that.
They don't play into the
I bet
mindset,
they don't.
but it's an interesting point
I just wonder
about really why
what was happening there.
But the Commission was very critical of the employer's lack of protection of their own employees. Because what they've said here is the abuse is clearly a breach of the passenger's responsibility to act in accordance with the passenger's code of conduct, which apparently one exists. The respondent has simply condoned the actions of the passenger in breach of their TransLink policy, and the passenger claimed to be a law student. The respondent should have sent the appropriate section of the video of the incident to the Dean of Law for the local university,
my goodness,
so that it could be identified and appropriate action taken against him, rather than dismissing the applicant.
So do that instead. Have the law student have a fit and proper test issue.
Well, to be fair, what they did was actually disgusting.
I'm not saying it was right, but they're kids.
Well, I mean, they're a law student, so they're at least in adult age.
Yes, that's fair enough.
And frankly, to get into an incident where you are abusing a bus driver such that they call the police is matters which I think...
I'm certainly not absolving the law student on this point. The law student was literally breaking the law in Victoria at that time.
Yes.
And why the police gave a warning and let her get onto another bus is a matter for the police. But going back to the original issue, Karen is exasperating all these issues, because we're not, I assume we're not talking about at the beginning of the COVID situation. We're talking about sort of at the end, after Victoria got out of their lockdowns, that sort of thing, because Victoria only got out of their lockdowns in, say, October, November-ish last year.
16th of September.
Yeah, so they were kind of in and out of those lockdowns. Emotions were high. Karen could have exercised better judgment and what I like to call the should we test.
Should she have had any issues?
Should she really have started this thing? And she had full knowledge that as she did, she was doing something wrong against the employer. Okay, so the question is whether she should have been terminated or sanctioned, right? Well, for a start, we don't know what else is going on there. We don't have all the information. The Commissioner seems to be going on a bit of a tangent, in my view. Taking a broader approach to what should have been done. There is no responsibility of the bus company to be sending things off to the law, to the Dean of the Law.
No, that would have probably been a step too far. But if you take their flavour from it being
just a bit excessive.
In this incident, you have a bus driver who they've noted the fact that she didn't enforce the mandate. Really, all she did was tell him to put a mask on and then continued to drive. In situations like this, who really is the one who's acting inappropriately? Yeah,
but we don't actually know what happened. I think you and I are going to fundamentally disagree about this generally. But we actually don't know what happened. We don't know. She hopped on the bus, or was it a he? He hops on the bus. Karen says, pop your mask on. And what does he go? Fuck off, Karen, and sits down?
No.
I mean, what are we talking about here?
He then continued to...
He just went nuts at her. I disagree. We know that from our own experiences with people here in Queensland not following the COVID rules, that they have this massive overreaction to being caught out as such. any sensible adult, especially one who's in the service industry, will know that. I think she's asking for trouble, even by putting it out there. And if she's a sensible human being, she would have known that it was going to cause problems. Because at any given day with any given person, it probably would have. This is not a 1 in 10 people. It's a kind of a mystery on how it's going to pan out here. People who are not following the rules on this point always overreacted. Very few of them went, oh, I'll just put my mask on there. No, they all went nuts about it. I have a right not to wear a mask. We've heard it all, right? And we as employment lawyers hear it too. So I think she should have known better. Whether she should have been terminated, and I'm not absolving the stuff that happened afterwards. I'm talking about the step that she took.
Yeah,
at that.
And they did the same.
And just kind of
the point at which she said put a mask on is fundamentally the point at which she apparently refused a lawful and reasonable direction.
So
everything thereafter is.
So are we saying it is okay to refuse a lawful and reasonable direction and continue having your job, even though we know a refusal to comply with a lawful and reasonable direction is a serious misconduct breach?
Well, I suppose the answer is really in the question more than anything is certainly the commission was satisfied that she didn't refuse a lawful and reasonable direction because the direction itself was unreasonable. Because it leads to a situation where employees essentially put our workplace health and safety risks.
Well, I just wonder though if we had explored let's say we don't put a policy in place, and essentially up to each bus driver to
do their own thing,
do whatever they think is right in these situations. There are a lot of individuals out there who are also bus drivers who would be quite happy to escalate that, and without a lawful and reasonable direction on how to interact, to govern it, there would be an awful lot of escalations there. So if we say you can't let somebody on, I mean, we know what happened. We know what happened here. The first day we had the you can't come in unless you're vaccinated rule, people were getting so abused. These poor 15-year-olds who were working in cafes were getting so abused. The owners had to shut their shops.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, they couldn't have staff. They just couldn't have their staff being berated like that.
Yeah, it was just an incredibly poisonous experience. And then you've got all the people on the bus who are also experiencing that. Surely the better way to go is to be passively, interacting with us. Have your signs up. Yes, there might be people on the bus who's asking this person to put their mask on. There might be a bit of a kerfuffle in that way. But you're not instigating it, creating a bigger problem here. Because some people will not just react by going, fuck off, Karen, but actually be physical about the whole thing. So from a work health and safety perspective, what they were asking sounds like a sensible way to deal with a very heated, emotional situation.
Would your view on it change given one of the interesting things about it was there was no signage, which the commissioner noted to be very odd because and actually drew the fact that there were signs on pubs, cafes, workplaces, 7-Elevens, everywhere. And it was a bit strange there was no signs.
And perhaps they could have taken a step and have the right to refuse entry onto the bus, which is going to be difficult when you hop on a bus from the back, for instance, because I know here in Queensland you do. Look, I think the signage thing's a problem, obviously, because the company wants you to do nothing, but they also don't want to govern the rules either, And look, just as something that happened to me, I was on public transport and the bus driver wasn't wearing his mask properly. I actually called the Brisbane City Council and asked them about it, and they said, not my problem. Not my problem that my worker isn't following the rules in that way. And that's to protect me as the passenger, that person wearing a face mask. So I took exception to the fact that these workers weren't wearing them properly, not protecting me when they come in contact with far more people in a day than I would ever come in contact with as a solicitor. So there's some interesting kind of just stepping away from the rules, going, it's not my problem, I'm not going to deal with it. But on the flip side, if there was a rule to let them do what they wanted, that would have escalated things way worse. And if there was a rule to kick them off the bus, that could have also created an escalation.
Yeah, well, almost
so
certainly.
From a work health and safety point of view,
damn if you don't.
That's right. Well, you just happen to have a commissioner who disagrees.
I think one of the problems they had in the end was one that really came out in Cross, which was, and if I read out, the attitude of the respondent in not worrying of whether the passengers comply with the government mandate during a public health emergency is concerning. It would appear that the primary concern of the respondent was not the safety of its passengers or its employees or the public generally, but rather being on time. And assuming that
It's a very old story.
Assuming that played out in the witness box, you can see why that would piss a commissioner off. Being actually, you didn't care about your employees, you didn't care about the passengers, you didn't care about any of that. You actually just didn't.
This is the old truckie rule. Truckies have to speed, truckies have to take drugs, truckies have to do this because they have to get the stuff on time. Setting aside all the issues. Oh, look, at the end of the day, bring on driverless buses.
Yes, trams, driverless buses, all that stuff.
Bring on people driving away. Let's get more of people out there, not in their cars. I would love it if I got a car and it drove for me. I'd just sit there and be like, doo-doo-doo. Life is brilliant.
On the final note on that case, just circling back, we often talk about that you need to judge the public policy whenever you're giving legal advice, and that is kind of flavour you get from the government.
What's happening?
Coming down, because the judiciary...
Because that's where it's based, that's right.
Will, take their lead a little bit.
That's right. Somehow the judiciary have to interpret public policy. Yeah.
And interestingly, this commission actually specifically noted it, saying, I'm adopting the obita from the Prime Minister. Every Premier and Chief Health Officer in every state were advising at the time for Australians to stay home and, quote, if you must go out, wear your mask.
Oh, so he's also advocating mask wearing.
Absolutely.
Yes, I like the way
that it's a really
it's a public statement.
It's
more
an
than
insight
else.
into what it means to be the advice that we give, which is you have to judge.
You do.
Because the commissioners will do the same.
Our job is to interpret the law, and the law is interpreted through public policy as well, and we need to keep that in mind. Well, I'm sure everybody who has been listening and watching today has their own opinion. You and I have obviously disagreed.
We have a different opinion, but that's what it's like.
You're happy for the person to keep their job, whereas I would have probably fired them. I don't know, I wasn't there, but hopefully somebody out there has learned a little bit from this.
Yes, if nothing else, that law can be very complicated.
Law is very complicated, and even people in the same office can't agree sometimes.
Yes, and that is what litigation risk is. We often talk about to clients, you never know what...
litigation is risky.
You never know who's going to win, because if we were both judges on this panel, we'd have different opinions. There'd be two different decisions.
Thank you everybody for listening and watching the Lawcast today, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time.
See ya.
See you later.